Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this event. I'm Jennifer Lind. I am an associate fellow at the Asia program at Chatham House and a professor at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. I'm very happy to be chairing our event today, which comes in the wake of some highly consequential developments and examines a relationship that is important both historically and going forward. We're delighted to have some wonderful presenters with us today. Our panelists are Professor Yūichi Hosoya of Keio University, Japan, and Professor Alessio Patalano, who's a reader in East Asian Warfare and Security at the Department of War Studies at King's College, London. And also with us today is Mr. Simon Wright of Japan House in London. And I'm going to hand it over right now to Simon for some brief remarks to get us going. Simon, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much, Professor Lind. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Simon Wright. I am Director of Programming at Japan House London. We at Japan House London are delighted to be able to work with Chatham House and the Embassy of Japan in the United Kingdom on this, the first in a new series of events looking at Japan-UK cooperation and governmental policy towards bilateral and global issues. Just a brief word about Japan House. Japan House is a multi-purpose 3-floor venue providing a platform for a wide variety of aspects of Japan, including events, exhibitions, a retail space and restaurant in London, in Kensington High Street, where our distinguished participants today could have been, had times been different. Japan House has currently opened the ground floor facility and will gradually open the other 2 floors depending on the developing situation. And we look to open our next major exhibition in September. In the meantime, technology allows us all to be together virtually. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. I look forward to the next time we can be together, hopefully at Japan House London. Thank you very much. I hope you have a very fruitful discussion. I shall now pass you back to our chair today, Professor Lind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. I definitely have to come to Japan House because if the beautiful bookcases behind you are any indication, it must be an amazing space indeed. So I'm going to take it over to our panel now. And we're going to start off with Professor Hosoya, followed by Professor Patalano. Yūichi, please speak for about 10 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. It's 9 o'clock in the evening in Tokyo, and I'm glad to see both Jennifer and Alessio. They are the most respected scholar of Japanese foreign and security policy in Japan and well known to the world. And I'm always happy to be with them to discuss on a lot of issues surrounding Japan. I like to use my 10 minutes by answering 2 questions which I made. The first question is, why is the UK-Japan security cooperation is important? The second question is, why is the UK important for Japanese security policy? And maybe I will use my 10 minutes by answering these two questions. First question, why is the UK-Japan security cooperation important? Basically, I always feel that everybody is crazy about the future of US-China relations. Of course, even in Japan, every day, if not every hour, we always think about the future of US-China relations, which direction they're going to, and how will it become? Because the future of the US-China relation will undoubtedly impact us all. But it's not enough. I think that we have so many other things that we have to think about. And the UK-Japan security cooperation is such a thing that we need to take into consideration for some reasons. A good news is that according to the most recent opinion poll by the Lowy Institute in Australia, just a month before, the question to the respondent is that how much do you trust the following countries to act responsibly in the world? And there are 7 parts. And the number 1 is UK. 84% of respondents answered that UK usually acts responsibly. And the number 2 is Japan, 82%, 84% and 82%. These 2 parts, the trust, are really outstanding. And it means that generally speaking, particularly in Australia, they trust in both the UK and Japan. Of course, both UK and Japan have so many problems, domestically and internationally, but they trust in UK's behaviors and Japanese behaviors for some reasons. And number 3 is the United States. 51% of respondents answered that US basically act responsibly. I think that the small side of the this US is partly due to the words and the behaviors of President Trump. But anyway, their trust, the Australian people trust much less in the US than in UK and Japan. And the worst of the 7 parts is China. Only 23% of respondents answer that China basically acts responsibly. And the number is significant because 2 years before, twice many people responded that China was a responsible power. It means that in the last 2 years, a huge numbers of Australians lost their trust in China. So if we combine the 2 parts, United States and China, it accounts only 74%. But UK 84 and Japan 82. So maybe I can say that the UK and Japan are the most trusted power in the world because these are not, well, in Australia or even in the ASEAN countries. Basically, Japan is regarded as the most trusted power. So even though the power of Japan is quite modest, Japanese power is unlike Chinese power or United States power. But basically, we can say that the UK and Japan have been acting responsibly, particularly in defending rule-based international order. So Australia, Canada, ASEAN, and many European countries generally and naturally think that they can rely on both the UK and Japan. So this is the first question, my answer to the first question. And my answer to the second question, why is the UK important for Japanese security policy? My answer is because the UK is usually seen as the most important security partner after the United States. Let me provide you some reasons for this. I think that many of you might be familiar with the fact that the recently Japanese foreign and security policy is focusing on the free and open Indo-Pacific vision. It means that Japan has been defending and trying to bring stability in the Indo-Pacific region. To do that, we need partners. And we usually think that the United Kingdom has both will and capacity of doing this. Doing this means that to defend both peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, together with Commonwealth partners such as Canada, Australia, India, and so on. So, of course, United States is the most important country, security partner to Japan. So what I am saying is that after the United States, the UK is the most important security partner because the United States is not just a security partner. United States is Japan's only ally. So we cannot neglect the importance of the United States, American rule. But ally is not enough. Of course, that's the most important thing for Japanese security policy, but we need more than that. We need security partners with our alliance with the United States. So That's why I said that the UK is Japan's most important security partner, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. So by combining Japanese alliance with the United States and Japanese partnership with these countries, UK, Australia, India, Canada, and so on, maybe we can stabilize the region by defending rule-based international order. That's why I'm saying that UK is now very important for Japanese security policy because as Alessio wrote in his recent paper, UK is increasing its interest in the Pacific. Previously, UK uses the word Far East, but now I agree with his idea that UK should focus on the importance of the Indo-Pacific region. And more, I feel that UK is active and more influential in the region. So these are my answers to my own two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Hosoya. I'm going to hand it over now to Alessio, and then we'll have just some discussion of both of your remarks after he speaks. Alessio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this, Jennifer. First of all, I'd like to express my thanks and join my colleagues in thanking both Chatham House and Japan House and the Embassy of Japan for organizing these events. I think first thing that I could say is try to follow on Hosoya Sensei's act by asking my own questions, but connecting them to the points that he's already set out. First of all, I think one of the great things about this webinar is that it is happening at an incredibly timely moment. This is a point in time from a UK perspective where fundamental components of its future projection in the world are taking place. The integrated defense and security review is going to be a very important element of setting the foundations for what in the foreseeable future the UK sort of engagement as a security actor, as a global and international security actor is going to look like. So having the opportunity to discuss some of the elements, some of the thinking happening in London about it today with such a distinguished audience, I think is absolutely timely and very, very important to enrich such a debate. And in relation to that, I will try to address two and a half fundamental questions. First, I would probably sort of ask the question, what is Asia to the UK? What does it mean? Why does it matter? And this is an important question to ask because, as Yūichi already alluded to, we cannot understand the crucial significance of the UK-Japan relationship unless we place it within the context of a changing relationship and importance that Asia overall, dare I say the Indo-Pacific, has to the UK. So I wanted to sort of briefly tackle this question, then sort of further explore another two interlinked, what I call like one and a half question, that is, why Japan, why now? These are closely sort of connected to each other. So let's start with the first sort of point, the one in which the importance of Asia to the UK overall is changing, and in particular after Brexit and as the first steps taken by the government in terms of understanding where the axis, the main sort of center of world affair is shifting, the interests that have been the efforts by the British government to look, for example, at things like a Trans-Pacific partnership as one of the top items on the agenda is a clear indication whereby the UK government sees itself as a sort of engaging increasingly more with a part of the world that until there recently was considered far and away. And perhaps this, starting with this, it's worth pointing out that the East is no longer far if you're in London. And that's for a number of reasons. And I would probably list three. One, there is a significant institutional understanding that is changing across the UK, different departments of government, because since 2017, the UK has had a continuous presence with deployments of assets in the region, which allowed the country to have a much greater first-hand experience with core issues of security and governance in that part of the world. And that knowledge, that institutional knowledge, is currently being transferred back, and it's informing the way the debate is being carried out within the different components of government. Whether it was HMS Sutherland that was deployed in the Pacific and started the implementation of the UN Security Council resolution on ship-to-ship transfer back in early 2018, being the first ship doing it together with Japan, as a matter of fact, or whether it is the maintaining the international maritime order in the South China Sea, with HMS Albion conducting the only known outside the context of the United States effective challenge of excessive maritime claims within 12 nautical miles around the strait baselines in the Paracel Islands. All these elements combined together and subsequent experience has been very important for what I think is the first change, or the first sort of measure of how within the British government the importance of Asia is being reassessed, and that is, in addition to usual knowledge based on individual contacts, the Foreign Office, but certainly from a defense and security perspective, which is the main topic of today, this growing institutional knowledge that was missing for a certain period of time, now it's been transferred that. So it's been sort of informing the way the current debate is taking place. Now, the other two elements are, of course, one, the changing nature of the relationship between the United States and China. Both countries retain a significant importance for the UK government. The United States is the paramount security partner for the UK, and China over the past few years has been a very important economic partner. However, within this context, there is no longer an opportunity for the British government to shy away from the broader context set up by the National Security Strategy under the Trump administration, that draws upon a fundamental principle. We live in an age of a competition in international politics, and that sort of Sino-American competition is something one can no longer avoid. So it's been very important for the UK government and different departments of government to start thinking about what in practical terms that means for them. Related to this is the third point, which I think is equally important, and that it's specific about China and the role that China has in British political debate over the broader Asia, Indo-Pacific region, in two ways. First of all, whereas previously one could have argued that East Asia in a broader sense, Indo-Pacific, if you want to use a more modern nomenclature, was a collection of the individual issues and bilateral relations with some spots here and there of multilateral sort of engagement. That is no longer the case, whether it is in relation to the problems with the joint statement concerning the status of Hong Kong in light of the new security law, whether it is violations and significant abuses towards human rights in Xinjiang, whether it is 5G, whether it is nuclear power plants. There is no longer a chance to look at this as a sort of like self-isolating issues. You have to start thinking about a broader problem of a strategic approach to China. And so these elements have been very important. The way in Parliament and across government, people need to start thinking about engagement with some of the leading actors in the region, notably China, and against the context of the US-China competition, has meant that you can no longer have a piecemeal approach to these issues. You need to start thinking about how to integrate that part of the world where these actors are operating and from where these actors can project influence well beyond the borders of the region. What does it all mean to UK strategy moving forward? So a change in terms of institutional understanding and experience with the region, a change in the sort of structural politics in international affairs in which US-China competition creates a very different setup for the British government, and the way in which we can no longer approach particularly sort of China policy issues as a piecemeal sort of like pick and choose selected issues, but more like a comprehensive approach on how to deal with China in international relations. I think these are all essential, the three essential factors that have contributed to change how politically in the UK the perception about Asia is changing. I think specifically, though, it is appropriate to talk about Indo-Pacific, and I have been sort of clearly stating this in a variety of publications, that it is appropriate for the British government to consider adopting a way to characterize the region revolving around this notion of the Indo-Pacific. And here I will just sort of briefly mention 3 points around it. Indo-Pacific is now a concept that is well spread across the broader East Asian region, and it's a proliferation of different ideas. The Japanese version, which was the first one, is very different from the American version, and both of them are different from the Australian, the Indian, and ASEAN. So the UK has, if the UK moving ahead wants to engage more with the region, adopting a framework that is consistent with that of partners and allies, it makes absolute sense. It also gives a sense of the order of the organizing priorities. It is a fundamentally maritime region in which prosperity from an economic point of view starts from the maritime connectivity that underpins the links across various countries. And I think that again speaks directly to why for the UK that matters, because the UK agenda towards the region is going to be prosperity-led, focusing on how improving the quality of living standards in that parts of the world. So, and thirdly, and of course, it's because it's the one way through which for the UK, from a defence and security perspective, is always going to be the easiest way to engage with this part of the world. Linking it to other areas, most notably North Africa and the Middle East, where UK presence is already gauging strong and long-standing interests. But why Japan and why now? And here I'm going towards a sort of like the core of the additional points that I wanted to make to these initial remarks today. Well, first of all, the relationship with Japan is perhaps one of the most developed when we look within the Indo-Pacific context, outside, of course, of the relationship with the United States. And it is a relationship that is articulated, it's complex, it has multiple layers, it has a strong economic layer, but again, at the defense and security level, it speaks to global challenges as well as more specific security challenges in areas of common interest. From a global perspective, whether it is about global governance and maintenance of the international environment, this is essential because if we think about it, the Indo-Pacific region is particularly prone to disasters, is particularly prone to natural disasters, and therefore the deterioration of the global environment, the deterioration of due to both global change as well as the misuses of the resources at our disposal. And here I think about the mismanagement of maritime resources, both living and non-living. This brings Japan and UK very closely aligned on what is sort of a better way to maintain the international existing maritime order, and it has a very close understanding of how these issues relate back specifically to security. And again, the other element to this is how both for Japan and the UK, areas that were considered at the periphery of each other's natural sphere of action. And here I think in particular the Western Indian Ocean, whether it is towards the Middle East or eastern part of Africa, there is a growing convergence of common interest in looking at specific regional security dynamics that even just 10 years ago would have been difficult to think about. But why now? I think now, again, the key issue is that the UK, from a UK perspective, we've entered a situation and we entered the context where we're looking at the integrated review, and the understanding that we have of the outcome of this process is a very significant shift that will set the pace on how the UK engages globally in the foreseeable future. And from my perspective, the connection of why now and why Japan, it's because of one overarching sort of element of the story, and that is the ability for the UK to continue to shape international security and to continue to remain a global actor that is engaged on the issues that matter in the foreseeable future. This idea of shaping requires an element of constant engagement. And as COVID has already started to highlight, this is going to be a question to engage with in the context of this integrated review, because expected resources available in the future might be sort of more complicated to obtain than before. So thinking long and hard on how to maximize capability in order to ensure continuity in presence, in order to achieve an output that is this shaping activity, focusing on maintaining stability, and as a result of that promote prosperity, are going to be key guiding principles that should inform the way in which the integrated review goes. And from that perspective, the cooperation with Japan is going to be absolutely essential. Besides the United States, Japan is by far the closest ally, and the last 3 years of continuous deployment have tested and created a new opportunity to push the envelope of that security cooperation a step further. Just a week ago, the fleet commander of the Royal Navy and the RAF marshal responsible for developing the F-35 project were talking in another context, another webinar, on the back of an article that just the day before had covered in the Times the possibility to forward deploy one of the future carriers of the Royal Navy in that part of the world, and Japan was clearly mentioned as one of the actors that will enable that to do. I think that regardless of the type of platform that may or may not be deployed in the sort of more forward capacity at the end of the integrated review, the idea behind it is absolutely essential. Maximizing capabilities in the way that whatever it is available generates the greatest outputs will require, if we're thinking about shaping postures, being more presently, sort of more regularly deployed, and as a result of that, develop the necessary links logistically in terms of intelligence and information sharing, so to have a common picture that will allow a country like the UK to deliver in output, maintaining stability, and at the same time speak to the convening power that relates to a truly global international security actor. In this respect, I will conclude suggesting that perhaps things that needs to be at the top of the agenda for both government is precisely this. First, to compare notes about what the geopolitical framework that each government is using to look at the future, to what extent they're compatible and to what extent can converge. In this respect, I do believe that assuming whatever format an Indo-Pacific concept for the UK will be essential to favor that kind of discussion. And to highlight the principles in it that one can converge upon. Secondly, identify also areas to geographic areas where specific cooperation can be brought about and increased. And here I think the Western Indian Ocean is a natural place for that to happen. Thirdly, how to mutually support each other so that Japan becomes a more regular feature, a more regular security actor in parts of the world where until recently it was not the case. And certainly the UK can be a much more regular, almost resident presence in parts, including the sort of Pacific side of the Indo-Pacific equation. And thirdly, think about how improve a common and construct a common picture, how to understand the challenges that we face ahead better together. Here again, improving the intelligence sharing capacity that's been talked about recently, very important point, but again, make it a comprehensive, not just about defense and security, but also broader aspects that fit into a broader understanding of national security in both countries. On the back of this, I think I'll stop it here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to engage, and I'll look forward to the questions from the audience and indeed from Jacob.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your remarks. I'm going to go back to Hosoya-san first. And what I'd specifically like to ask about is, what does Japan look for in the UK in terms of, obviously, Japan has its close relationship with the United States. It has close regional partnerships with many friends in the region and around the world. But when Japan thinks of the UK, what is it that it sees that, how should I put it? What would you like the UK to help you with or to do for you in the economic realm, political realm, security realm? And how do the general public view this as well? So when Japan thinks of the UK as a partner, what specifically are they interested in?
Thank you very much. Basically, each power has its own distinctive role and capacity, like the EU, India, Australia, Korea, and so on. Like when we look at Russia, the size of Russian economy is smaller than Korean economy. On the other hand, of course, EU's military power is quite limited, considering the difficulty of coordinating different kind of concepts of security among member states. So each has its limits, and the UK has its own limit, like economy. Now I think that the Japanese government is much more interested in enhancing tie, not with the UK, but with the EU, because of the size, of course. The size of the EU economy is much bigger than the size of British economy, regardless of Japanese strong affiliation with British culture. So how about the UK's role, UK's international identity? Of course, UK is distinctly quite capable of deploying its military power, military force, or to project its power all over the world, unlike other EU member states like Germany or Poland or Spain and so on. That's why there are not so many countries, powers, with whom Japan can deeply collaborate with in security policy area. So in the Pacific, like Elizabeth, the aircraft carrier of the Royal Navy, and its own strike fighters of the UK Royal Air Force. These powers are really valuable to Japan because not so many powers in the world can enjoy such influential military projection power capacity. So in that way, I think that it's really good news to Japanese government or Japanese self-defense force to listen to the UK's voice, which is much more active and much more willing to play a larger role in the world, because I think that based upon the concept of global Britain, the UK must really link its own identity to the world after the Brexit. Without engaging in the world, the UK will diminish into a really, really small power. So that's why I think that it's a kind of a pendulum swing of British foreign policy between the European pole and global pole. Well, that's why I think that the UK is naturally now tending to try to associate itself with much broader world, like Japan, China, United States, India, and so on. And I think that Japan can be a really good partner or candidate to be collaborated with. So in that way, I think that UK is really valuable security partner, if not the most important economic partner. So this is my own view.
Great, thank you. Alessio, let me go back to you. In the past, we've seen some distance, metaphorical distance between Japan and the UK with respect to perceptions of China, perceptions of Chinese behavior, perceptions of a threat from China. I'm thinking about the differing reactions to China's founding of the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, for example, which Britain's decision to join was highly consequential, basically leading most of Europe to sign on as a result. And Japan was, of course, quite dismayed by the thought of kind of a Chinese leadership in international development causing a sort of a race to the bottom in development standards, human rights, and so on. Now, of course, we could have a whole conversation about who was right, who was wrong, to what extent, is the AIB acting as people had predicted, and so on. That's a whole discussion. But what's interesting to me is we're seeing, in my view, it seems, especially with the Huawei decision in Britain recently, we've seen a little bit different decision-making going on these days. So to what extent are you seeing more convergence in the British and Japanese views? And what are the areas in which you're observing that?
I think I completely agree with the logic of the question and with your point that certainly in the past the UK had a much more nuanced position vis-a-vis China as a rising power when it was rising, and China as a risen power today. And that's true. And I think it boils down in terms of where we've come from, and that is particularly during the sort of Cameron Osborne years, the idea of trying to develop a very fruitful relationship, especially economically, between the UK and China. The now not so popular golden age of UK-China relations was somewhat of the overarching umbrella under which you could explain a lot of the positions that the UK has had until the recent past on matters related to China. But I think now this is changing. And as I say, there is a change that it covers different angles of British, if you want, society. At a public perception level, different recent poll surveys conducted, although the methodology of these surveys is the thing that one should really pay attention to. But generally speaking, there is a growing perception in the UK that China is less of a trustworthy partner, and that China's behavior internationally is problematic, to say the least. So regardless of the particular sort of methodology, you could say that there is a public perception that is changing insofar as China as an international actor is concerned. Of course, that doesn't mean that at sort of like a specific level, whether it is engagement with aspects of Chinese culture, Chinese students, and so on and so forth, things are still absolutely fine. If you were to ask me what really is changing, I think the situation in Hong Kong, and this goes back not just to the security law, but also to the protests in Hong Kong. And the attitudes towards the protests that the Chinese government, the government in Beijing has had over the last, more than a year now, certainly contributed to plant the seeds for a degree of surprise. And then after that, a degree of concern. And certainly in the past few weeks, you've seen in sort of major weekly political magazines whereby the debate over Hong Kong and what it means in terms of what it tells us about the nature of the political government in Beijing have really contributed to spread much more widely across society and perhaps contribute to this change of perception. I would say, in addition to this, there is also a question that Parliament is changing in its attitude towards China. As I said in my remarks, one of the key things is that the number of MPs these days who have been concerned, starting from Hong Kong, moving on to 5G, moving on to nuclear power plant, whether you are Labour, whether you are Tory, perhaps a little less Lib Dem, but generally speaking, MPs that are sort of engage with matters of foreign policy. And this is, well, inside the Foreign Affairs Committee and outside of it, there is a much greater awareness of the things that are happening in China. If you go on social media and Twitter, you see a lot of the sort of leading MPs constantly talking about this and going into talking about Xinjiang and the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, a whole host of issues. Right. Recently established within the Tory party is the China Research Group, which joins a group of outfits inside Parliament who are engaging with the question of China. So I think from a broader public perception and political point of view, certainly there is no longer this is no longer a question that is the prerogative of a small number of highly specialized MPs or intellectual elites. This has been branched out to a much broader audience. The third thing, I think, and this is really from a government perspective, so one step up, I think the pressure created by the Trump administration on the British government on looking more closely at the implication of a relationship with China that does not set certain red lines very clearly is going to be problematic in Anglo-American relation. That's also very clear, and I think the case of 5G and how the British government position from January to this week has changed from 35% sort of a capped introduction of Huawei into the future 5G network to no more of this, they're out. I think it's indicative, and we can debate the matter and the separate sort of context, but specifically to your question, you can certainly see that pressure from the United States and United States' position vis-a-vis China are perhaps the ones that really are driving and sort of sharpening the attention of the government. So government, parliament, wider public audience, certainly you can register quite a considerable change of perception when China is concerned. Okay,
great. Thank you. Let me go back to you, Hosoya-san, and I'm going to start bringing in some of our questions from the audience. We have a wonderful list of questions that I wish we could spend the next several hours discussing, because they're really covering quite a range of different themes here. And so bringing in some of our audience questions, sort of bundling them together, Hosoya-san, we had a questioner wondering just what specifically do the Japanese see Britain is helping them with militarily? So militarily specifically, right? So speaking militarily, what are the missions and what roles would the UK be performing in Japan's eyes? Another questioner was wondering about Japan and the United Kingdom participating in freedom of navigation operations, FONOPS operations with the United States in the South China Sea. And also we had a member of the audience asking about the potential for co-development of defense equipment. So is there the potential for collaboration in weaponry development, for example, which would be a very striking change, right? I mean, Japan had been basically self-constraining its to not engage in the arms trade. And then over time, we've seen kind of a relaxation of this, such that Japan is now, it's seen as acceptable and even useful for Japan to collaborate with its close allies and partners. And of course, the UK would be considered as that. So these are the different issues that people are proposing and asking for your thoughts on.
Thank you very much. So many good questions, and I have to be brief to save time for Alessio and some others. First of all, UK's role in Japanese security policy. Of course, as I said before, UK's role is limited, unlike the United States or US-Japan alliance. And UK role cannot be equal to American role in the region. And if what happens between the United States and China, I think that there are many rooms that the UK can do aside from intelligence cooperation and the cyber attack, cyber defense, and so on. So what I mean is that basically, as I said, of course, Japanese security role is also very limited because of so many reasons, constitutional reason and Japanese weapons and the Japanese budgets and so on. But what I mean is that basically the UK's role and Japanese role is not to engage in a huge war, but to defend rule-based international order, like to defend freedom of navigation. But Japanese and the UK's role to defend the freedom of navigation or rule-based international order would be quite different from American role. American role is much more military-oriented, I would say, because it has a huge military power. But, well, like a patrolling mission and anti-piracy missions, there are so many other areas like PKO and so on. So if we talk about much high intensified operations, I don't think that you can, or particularly Japan can do a lot, but if we focus on the importance of defending rule-based international order, particularly in the peacetime, I think that UK has sufficient military power to do that. And when we think about defense equipment, this is a much more sensitive issue because recently President Trump has been pressuring Japan to try to respond to the problem of trade deficit of the United States. That's why I think that unlike before, much more than before, the Japanese government under Prime Minister Abe has been trying to purchase more defense equipment from the United States, like F-35. Japan decided to buy 105 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters. It's a huge purchase. I think that one of the reasons why Japanese government did it, is to try to respond to President Trump's strong request to solve the problem of trade deficit. Of course, it's not quite reasonable to do this way, but this means that unlike 10 years before, when Japanese government under the DPJ tried to or thought about buying a Eurofighter through British government, but nowadays it is, I think, much more unlikely to purchase British or European those defense equipment because Japan needs more American engagement in Asia or in the Pacific under the President Trump. And we need to satisfy, if not to respond positively, American strong request to fulfill some of the problems which US government has been posing to Japan. So in that way, I think that nowadays, defense equipment issue is much more sensitive issue, but there are many areas where Japan and UK can collaborate with, and I think that the two sides are becoming much more willing to collaborate in this area of joint development. And there are much broader area because of the loosening of constitutional restrictions or Japanese self-ban on the arms exports. I think there are much broader room for the cooperation between the two sides. So far, I just like to stop here.
Great, thank you. Alessio, let me go back to you and kind of on this question, building on the remarks that Hosoya-san was just telling us. One of the questioners in the audience was asking, what are the UK's capabilities to serve as a security ally or partner of Japan in the Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific? What would the UK need to serve as a useful partner in those missions? Is the UK, if you look at the UK's force planning, defense budget, and so on, does it look like it's buying those things? Is it planning to do those things? Like I know you're a long time, very serious observer of the nuts and bolts side of security studies. And so if you look at the UK's force posture, what does that tell us about its ability to participate in the kinds of missions that Japan might welcome its participation, or its interests in doing so?
That's an excellent question. And I think there's three things to say. First of all, it depends on what kind of, how do we count the security equation, whether we're looking at a global transnational security challenges in which the UK capability, if you want, portfolio goes well beyond just military assets in themselves. The UK remain one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. It is one of the very few nuclear states in the world. It also has reinvigorated its diplomatic presence in ASEAN, South Pacific islands, and in areas that are quite important and significant in order to at least address one dimension of the wider complexity, of the complex architecture of security matters in the Indo-Pacific region, and that is the multilateral dimension. So the UK retain a considerable amount of capabilities, if you want, in that sense, the sort of softer capabilities that I don't think should be kept separate, right? We need to approach this from a broader sort of perspective. So from a global point of view, or global challenges point of view, the UK remains as important, as relevant as ever, even more so in a context that is becoming increasingly more fragmented. And the UK and Japan have had a long-standing position on developing together an agenda that focuses on values and talking to each other what that specifically means politically, so that you can find areas of convergence to work together. And I think that's unlikely to change. That's very important. Connected to this and directly related to the question of defense capabilities, military capabilities, there's also something else that the UK continues to bring, hopefully, in a way that few others actors the world over can. And I think this is a point that implicitly Hosoya Sensei mentioned in one of his comments, and that is the political willingness to take a certain risk and to act when it must. This is something that no other country in the European Union, particularly insofar as Indo-Pacific security challenges are concerned, has proved so far. As I said at the beginning, the UK remains the only country outside the US to have conducted, not a phone-op, because the UK doesn't do phone-ops. And we can have a conversation about why it's good that they don't in a different webinar, but it's the only country to have conducted an express challenge to excessive maritime claims in the South China Sea other than the United States. Japan hasn't done it, Australia hasn't done it, France hasn't done it, no other country has. So when it comes to putting your money where your mouth is, well, the UK, I think, has proved in the last 3 years that is certainly bringing to whatever game is in town a political decision-making system that is capable of taking risks and to restate fundamental things such as the stability of the international order, in this specific case, the international maritime order. Now we're coming to the sticky point, that is the capabilities aspect. Whilst the previous 2 points are really important and should be forgotten, at the moment, part of the Integrated Defense and Security Review will tell us what kind of capabilities will be available in the future. I think it is fair to suggest that specifically having a conversation now about capabilities is almost irrelevant, because things can vary a lot. What I can certainly say, what I'd like to draw your attention on, is that it's not so much the capabilities that will make the UK stand out in the Indo-Pacific region that matter, but it's the capabilities that will allow the UK to leverage its convening power to produce a particular output together with its allies that really matter. Whether it is a frigate, an amphibious ship, a carrier, an offshore patrol vessel, it doesn't matter, or it matters less that once that asset or sets of assets are deployed in the region, will do with others. That is going to make a critical difference. And I think there is a general agreement within the UK government that this is something that cannot and should not be lost in the integrated review. Now, if the government decides to be bold, we might see larger, more multi-purpose type of assets being deployed more regularly, dare I say, for a very long period of time. It's not through access agreements, but certainly on a much more regular and resident-like way. But again, that is going to be key, is how long you stay in the region and how you organize your presence, because that will tell something to your partners and allies on how much they can rely on you and how much they need to engage with you in order to maximize your efforts to achieve common goals. So for once, Jennifer, I'm going to betray my own self and say that it's not so much the piece of kit that we should be focusing on, but how that piece of kit is going to be sent that part of the world, because that will tell them something to both partners, allies, and competitors or what kind of UK is showing up to join the game?
Thank you. And as much as we love discussing the kit, right, I think it's a really important point to, and it's a point that's very much coming through in the questions we're getting from the audience, that this is so much more of a broad challenge, that in terms of the US, the UK, Japan managing relations with China, this is, yes, there's a security aspect to it, but we can't forget that this is a relationship that all of these countries have relationships with China that are so multifaceted in a way that security challenges in the past perhaps were not. And other security challenges today, for example, are various countries' challenge that we face with North Korea. That's pretty much a security challenge, right? We don't have extensive trade relations with North Korea. We don't do collaborative research with North Korea. So the China challenge that our countries are sorting through right now is so multifaceted. And when we talk about having the requisite capabilities, one thing I'm just so struck by is we have talked about today the UK's capabilities in the military sense and political sense also. But when I think of Japan and the UK, I guess I have to confess to being a Japanophile and Anglophile. I've lived in both countries, and they are certainly, I have a soft spot for both of them. These are two countries that the world recognizes as being such vibrant, creative, global leaders in terms of their contributions to global culture and global life. And so from that standpoint, it really makes sense that the two of them they do belong in the same sentence. They certainly have a lot to offer each other. They absolutely have a lot to offer the region. We have a question from the audience with respect to the United States' perceptions of the UK-Japan relationship. And at the risk of answering for 350 million people, I guess I'll use my place on the panel to just mention, I think the US reaction to a more robust UK-Japan partnership would be incredibly positive. The US has been, for decades, encouraging Japan to take a stronger role in terms of building up capability, taking on new roles, greater assertiveness, and so on. So if that was manifested in a more active Japan-UK relationship, I think the US would be very excited about that. And conversely, also, we see the US has been, I think because of its interests in Asia, the US has been more ahead of its European allies in terms of being concerned about freedom of navigation in East Asia, China's growing political influence in East Asia, the implications for the rules-based order and things like this. So I think the US would very much appreciate if it saw other countries moving closer to US perceptions on that issue. And so again, if the UK seems to be moving in that direction, I think certainly Washington would be very happy about that. Again, we don't have time, sadly, to get to the other big question, which is what would be the effect of a different election result in the US, and how the Japanese would see this, how the British would see this, and how that would affect the relationship. So last time, 2016, I vowed I would get out of the business of any sort of predictions about elections, and I'm not going to betray that today. But it is going to be very interesting to see the future of US grand strategy under which administration comes in, and also to see our allies reacting to that grand strategy. It might be one that attempts, particularly you can imagine under a Biden administration, perhaps a desire to recreate, to go back to the way it was. You could also imagine, given the populist turn in the United States and given the the tenor of our national conversations today about domestic issues, about domestic divides and how to repair them, you could imagine the US grand strategy being significantly altered in the future. And so this is going to be something that all of our partners and allies are going to be managing. So it sounds like we're going to need another webinar or 12 to try and sort this out. So I'm going to bring us to a close today. And I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists so much. Thank our audience for your wonderful questions that led to our discussion. Yūichi Hosoya of Keio University, thank you for letting us keep you up at night. Alessio Patalano of King's College London, thank you so much for your insightful remarks. And Chatham House, again, is very grateful to Japan House of London and the Embassy of Japan in the UK for their co-sponsorship of this event. And I thank all of you for joining us. Have a wonderful night, a wonderful day, or a wonderful whatever. And we hope to see you again at a future event. Thank you.